You're worthless now, Daniel. Richard can give me everything you never could. Those were the words Melissa Carter spat the day he was fired in front of the entire office. Her hand already locked around his boss's arm. Richard is everything you'll never be, Daniel. You're finished. That was the venom she whispered as he walked out, humiliated, carrying a box of his belongings. You're nothing, Daniel. I can't waste my life on a man who has nothing to give. She said it with pride, abandoning him in his darkest moment for the man she thought was more powerful. I'm done with losers, Daniel. Richard can give me the life I deserve. That was the last knife she twisted, trading love for luxury without a second thought. You can't even keep a job, Daniel. Richard is everything you'll never be. Those cruel words echoed like a curse, sealing her betrayal before the entire company. Those were the last words Melissa Carter hissed at her boyfriend the day he was humiliated and fired in front of the entire office. Her hand already locked around his boss's arm, but what Melissa didn't know was that Richard was never truly the boss, and Daniel was never truly defeated. He was the hidden owner of Whitmore Enterprises, the man holding all the power she could never imagine. And when the truth exploded on her wedding day, the world watched as Melissa's empire of greed came crashing down. Viewers, have you ever been betrayed so deeply it felt like a physical blow to your chest? And if you were given the chance for justice, would you forgive or would you let them drown in the choices they made? Share your thoughts in the comments. The city buzzed with excitement. Invitations had gone out to the who's who of society. Richard Hale, the powerful CEO of Whitmore Enterprises, was marrying Melissa Carter, the dazzling woman who had left her longtime boyfriend behind. Their faces appeared on glossy magazines with headlines that screamed of power, love, and luxury. Melissa drank it all in. She floated through bridal boutiques draped in satin, surrounded by bridesmaids who envied her. She tried on diamonds that glittered under showroom lights, each stone a symbol that she had won. To her, this wedding wasn't about love. It was a coronation, proof she had climbed higher than she ever dreamed. Yet every time she looked into a mirror, Daniel's face flashed before her eyes, that calm, steady stare the day he was fired. The one that didn't break. She shook it off each time, forcing a laugh. He's nothing. He's gone. I chose right. Meanwhile, Richard was in his office, pacing. He had no idea his removal papers were already signed. He believed the company was his playground, the board his puppets. He called Melissa between meetings, promising her villas in Spain, diamond-studded vacations, and seats at elite galas. But beneath his charm, cracks showed. He snapped at assistants, barked at subordinates, and drank more than usual. Stress, he muttered. All this power. It's heavy. Melissa didn't care. She only saw the gifts. Across town, in a quiet boardroom far away from the flashing cameras, Daniel met privately with trusted directors. His demeanor was steady, measured, but his words carried steel. Richard has abused this company's trust long enough, he said. Melissa made her choice. She aligned herself with him. I won't expose them yet. Not until it matters, one director leaned forward. You're going to the wedding? Daniel gave a slight smile. Oh, I wouldn't miss it. Flashback, foreshadowing anchor. A memory rose unbidden. Daniel as a boy, walking hand in hand with his father at the company's annual gala. His father had leaned down, whispering, one day this empire will be yours. But remember, the ownership is not about wealth. It's about timing. The right truth revealed at the right moment can topple kings. The memory hardened Daniel's resolve. The wedding would be that moment. On the eve of the ceremony, Melissa sat in a luxurious hotel suite, surrounded by makeup artists and stylists. She stared at the diamond ring Richard had given her, enormous, gaudy, the kind she had once dreamed of. Yet as she twisted it on her finger, her stomach tightened. What if Daniel wasn't finished? What if that stare had meant something? She bit her lip, forcing herself to smile at her reflection. You've won, Melissa, she whispered. Don't doubt now. That night, as Melissa scrolled through her phone, a news alert popped up. Whitmore Enterprises announces emergency board restructure. New CEO to be revealed at upcoming event. Her champagne glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the marble floor. For the first time, fear crept into her perfect smile. The wedding morning broke with sunlight streaming over the city. Limousines lined the curb outside St. Andrew's Cathedral, chauffeurs standing by as guests in tailored suits and glittering gowns, stepped onto the red carpet. The press swarmed the entrance, cameras flashing, voices shouting, "Melissa, how does it feel to marry the most powerful CEO in the city? Richard, is this the beginning of a new dynasty?" Melissa basked in it, waving with a practiced smile. Her dress shimmered under the morning light, a cascade of silk and diamonds. Every move she made screamed victory. This is it, she thought. The life I deserve. Inside, the cathedral pulsed with wealth. Chandeliers glittered, pews filled with board members, politicians, and celebrities. A string quartet played softly while journalists whispered about the empire Richard controlled. Richard strode down the aisle with the swagger of a king. He shook hands, kissed cheeks, laughed loudly. His eyes flicked to Melissa, and for a moment he saw not a bride but a trophy. She didn't notice. At the back of the cathedral, unnoticed by most, a man in a dark tailored suit took a seat. His posture was calm, his presence quiet, but his eyes saw everything. Daniel Whitmore. A few guests glanced his way, confused. Wasn't he the disgraced employee who had been fired weeks ago? What was he doing here? But before whispers could spread, the organ swelled and the ceremony began. Melissa walked the aisle, every step echoing her triumph. She clutched her bouquet with trembling fingers, though she told herself it was nerves, not doubt. Richard stood waiting, smiling like a man who owned the world. Flashback, foreshadowing layer. As Melissa neared the altar, her mind flicked back to that day in the office. Daniel's calm eyes as he carried his box of belongings. That look haunted her still. She had laughed then, but now in the silence of the cathedral it gnawed at her. Why didn't he break? Why didn't he beg? The priest cleared his throat. "We are gathered here today." His voice boomed over the crowd. Guests leaned forward, eager for the spectacle. Midway through the vows, a commotion stirred near the cathedral doors. Journalists' phones buzzed, screens lighting up with breaking news. One headline stood out, brighter than the stained glass windows above. Breaking: Whitmore Enterprises announces new CEO. Identity revealed at wedding ceremony. Gasps rippled through the pews. Guests craned their necks, murmuring in confusion. Melissa's grip on Richard's hand tightened. Richard's smile faltered. "What is this?" He hissed under his breath. Melissa forced a smile, whispering, "Ignore it. It's nothing. Keep going." But her eyes betrayed her, flickering toward the back of the cathedral where Daniel sat in silence, his gaze fixed on the altar. The priest raised his hand, preparing to bless the couple. But before the words left his mouth, the cathedral doors swung wide. A company representative stepped inside, flanked by board members. His voice rang out, cutting through the ceremony. "Ladies and gentlemen, please rise to welcome the rightful CEO and owner of Whitmore Enterprises." Every head turned. Melissa's bouquet slipped from her hands and Daniel Whitmore stood. The cathedral was frozen in silence. The priest's hand hovered midair, the blessing unspoken. Guests twisted in their seats, phones buzzing with the breaking news alert. At the back, Daniel Whitmore rose slowly. His dark suit fit him like armor, his presence commanding even without a word. For weeks he had been invisible, the disgraced employee, the humiliated man. But now in this moment all eyes belonged to him. Melissa's breath caught in her throat. No, it can't be him," she whispered, her bouquet trembling in her hands. Richard barked across the aisle, trying to seize control. "What is the meaning of this?" "Sit down, this is my wedding." The company representative stepped forward, flanked by two board members in tailored suits. His voice carried over the murmurs. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce the rightful CEO and majority shareholder of Whitmore Enterprises. Mr. Daniel Whitmore." Gasps erupted. Some guests stood in shock. Others whispered Daniel's name as though it were a secret too heavy to carry. Photographers scrambled to capture the moment. Daniel's steps echoed as he walked down the aisle, past rows of stunned faces. He didn't look at the guests. He didn't look at Richard. His eyes locked only on Melissa. She staggered back, her diamond tiara glinting under the lights. "Daniel," she stammered, her voice cracking. You're not." Daniel's tone was calm, deliberate, slicing through the cathedral's air. "You left me because you thought I had nothing. You mocked me because you thought Richard was your upgrade. But Richard was never your salvation." He turned, facing Richard now. "He was just an employee, a thief, a parasite feeding off my company, and as of this morning he's nothing." Richard's face flushed crimson. "Lies. You can't. But one of the board members stepped forward, holding up official documents. As per majority ownership and board approval, Richard Hale has been removed from his position. Effective immediately, the crowd gasped again. Richard lunged toward the documents, but security intercepted him. His voice cracked with desperation. Melissa, tell them I'm still. Melissa's hand slipped from his arm. Her knees weakened. In an instant, the world she built shattered like the glass of her fallen champagne. Daniel faced her again, his voice steady, but edged with pain. You said Richard was everything I'd never be. You said I was finished. Tell me, Melissa, how does it feel to stand at the altar of a man who has already fallen? Melissa's lips quivered, her eyes darting between Daniel and Richard. The crowd waited, holding its breath. Before Melissa could answer, the doors of the cathedral burst open once more. A journalist, breathless, shouted from the back, "Breaking update! Richard Hale is under federal investigation for embezzlement and fraud." The cathedral exploded with noise, guests gasping, cameras flashing, reporters scrambling. Melissa dropped her bouquet. Richard's knees buckled, and Daniel simply stood there silent as justice unfolded exactly as he had planned. The cathedral was chaos. Journalists scribbled, cameras flashed, and guests buzzed in disbelief. Richard fought against the guards holding him back, shouting curses, his once commanding voice reduced to panic. But Melissa stood trembling at the altar, her gown heavy, her dreams crumbling faster than the shards of her fallen bouquet. Her carefully built fantasy of diamonds and power now looked like smoke vanishing in the air. "Daniel," she whispered, stumbling down from the altar steps. Her voice cracked, raw with panic. "Daniel, please, let me explain." The crowd hushed, leaning forward. All eyes were on her now, no longer with admiration, but with pity and judgment. Melissa reached him, her jeweled fingers clutching at his sleeve. "I didn't know," she pleaded. I thought you were just—" Her throat closed. She couldn't even finish the sentence. Daniel looked down at her, his expression calm but unreadable. The same calmness that once unsettled her, now unbearable. "You thought I was nothing," he said evenly, his voice steady enough for every corner of the cathedral to hear. "You thought loyalty was worthless, that love could be replaced by money. And you proved it, the very second I was fired." Melissa shook her head, tears smearing her mascara. "I was scared, Daniel. I wanted security. I made a mistake. Please let me make it right." Flashback, emotional layer. Her words pulled Daniel's memory back to the night he had given up a rare vacation just to work overtime, so Melissa could buy the designer handbag she claimed would make her feel seen. He had sacrificed comfort, convinced love was about giving. Yet in her eyes back then, gratitude had already been replaced with expectation. The signs were always there, he thought. I just refused to see them. The board members stood behind Daniel, stone-faced, waiting for his signal. Richard screamed from the side, "Melissa, don't beg him. He's nothing without this company." His voice cracked with desperation, betraying his own fear. Melissa spun toward Richard, then back to Daniel. She saw clearly now, one man stripped bare, the other standing unshaken. The choice she made was carved into history, and the cost of that choice now suffocated her. "Daniel," she whispered again, sinking to her knees, clutching his hand. "I still love you. Please, give me another chance." Daniel pulled his hand back slowly. The crowd held its breath. His voice was low, calm, and final. "Love is proven when the world collapses, Melissa. You left me in the rubble and married the man holding the match. Now you ask me to forget?" Her tears fell freely. "Please." Daniel's eyes softened for the briefest second, not with love, but with sorrow. "Melissa, you taught me something valuable. You showed me the cost of trusting the wrong person. And for that, I thank you. But my door, my heart, is closed to you forever." The cathedral erupted into whispers, guests murmuring in shock. Melissa crumpled onto the marble floor, sobbing. At that exact moment, Richard broke free from the guards, charging toward Daniel with a snarl. "You think you've won? This isn't over." Security lunged, but Richard was already too close. His hand reached into his jacket pocket, and gasps filled the air. What he pulled out made every guest freeze. The cathedral air grew thick with panic as Richard broke free from the guards. His face was red with rage, his suit disheveled, his eyes wild, nothing like the polished CEO he pretended to be minutes earlier. Everything you have should have been mine. He roared, shoving through the crowd. Guests gasped, backing away as he reached into his jacket pocket. For a breathless moment, the world seemed to stop. What would he pull out? A weapon? The collective exhale came as his hand revealed not a gun, but a thick envelope. He ripped it open and hurled the papers at Daniel's chest. Contracts fluttered to the marble floor like broken wings. Fake, Richard spat, his voice hoarse. These documents, these signatures, they're lies.
He's tricking you all?
I'm the rightful CEO, not him. The guests erupted into whispers, some recoiling in fear, others desperate for clarity. Daniel bent down, calmly picking up the scattered pages. He didn't rush. He didn't shout. He simply handed them to the nearest board member, who shook his head gravely. These are forgeries, the board member announced. Clumsy ones. Richard, you're finished. Richard's face twisted, veins bulging in his temple. He turned desperately to Melissa. Tell them, Melissa. Tell them you chose me because I'm the stronger man.
Tell them he's nothing.
Melissa froze, caught between her shattered pride and her collapsing future. All eyes turned to her. Her lips trembled, but no sound came. Daniel stepped forward, his voice sharp but controlled. This is who you left me for, Melissa. A man who steals, lies, and forges scraps of paper to hide his fall. You traded love for lust, loyalty for luxury, and this is what it bought you. Melissa's knees weakened. The diamonds on her dress felt like chains dragging her down. Flashback, foreshadowing anchor. Richard's fury reminded Daniel of a memory from the boardroom years earlier. His father had said, "A dishonest man will always reveal himself when cornered. The trick is not to stop him. It's to let him do the damage himself." Daniel's lips curved into the faintest smile. His father had been right. Richard was digging his own grave. The guards finally wrestled Richard back, pinning him against a pew. His shouting turned incoherent, spit flying as he cursed Daniel, cursed Melissa, cursed the world. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing wildly. The headline was already writing itself. Fallen CEO unravels at his own wedding. Melissa stood trembling, her eyes wide with horror. This wasn't the fairy tale she had dreamed of. This was a nightmare unraveling before the world, and she was trapped at its center. As Richard was dragged out of the cathedral screaming, Melissa turned back to Daniel, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel. Please, don't let them see me like this. Save me. Her words hung in the air. The crowd turned, waiting for Daniel's answer. Would he extend mercy, or would he let her drown in the consequences she had chosen? The cathedral was silent except for the fading echoes of Richard's screams as the guards dragged him outside. All eyes remained fixed on the altar, where Melissa stood trembling, diamonds glittering like broken glass across her gown. Her mascara streaked down her cheeks, her lips quivered. She took a step toward Daniel, her voice cracking. Daniel, please. Don't let them see me like this. Don't let this be the end of me. The crowd leaned forward, every guest desperate to hear what he would say. Daniel studied her, his face unreadable. For a long moment he said nothing. Then with deliberate calm he asked, Do you remember what you told me the night you left? Melissa's eyes flickered with panic. Daniel, He repeated her words, his voice low but strong, echoing in the cathedral. You said, Richard is everything you'll never be. You're finished. The silence was heavy. Melissa's knees buckled under the weight of her own cruelty reflected back at her. Flashback. Emotional spine. Daniel's mind flickered to another night. Years earlier, when he had worked late, sneaking into their small apartment with takeout because Melissa said she hated cooking after long days. She had smiled back then, wrapping her arms around him. Was it ever real? He wondered now. Or had she been calculating even then, measuring his worth against the wealth she desired? Melissa collapsed at his feet, her hands clutching his. I was wrong, Daniel. I didn't mean it. I thought you had nothing. I was scared. I thought Richard was stronger. Please, forgive me. I can love you better now. The crowd murmured, pity and disgust mingling in equal measure. Daniel looked down at her, his eyes soft for only a heartbeat. No, Melissa. Love is proven when the storms come. You ran at the first sign of rain. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I can change. I'll prove it. Daniel pulled his hand free, his voice carrying finality. The woman I once loved died the moment she chose diamonds over loyalty. The Melissa in front of me is a stranger, And strangers have no place in my life. Gasps rippled through the pews. Melissa fell back onto the marble floor, her sobs echoing through the cathedral. Some guests looked away, unable to watch. Others recorded every second, knowing the scandal would ripple through headlines for weeks. Daniel turned to the priest, his voice calm once again. Please continue with your service. This wedding is over. The priest hesitated, then quietly closed the book, nodding in solemn agreement. Daniel turned to leave, the cathedral doors swinging wide before him. But just as he stepped into the sunlight, Robert, his attorney, rushed to his side, gripping his arm. Daniel, he whispered urgently, there's something else you need to see. It's about Melissa and Richard. You don't know the full story yet. Daniel froze, his jaw tightening. The story wasn't finished. Daniel paused just outside the cathedral, sunlight spilling across the marble steps. Guests followed behind in clusters, whispering feverishly, the scandal already spreading like wildfire across the city. Reporters shouted his name, cameras flashing, but Daniel didn't flinch. His composure was iron. Robert pushed through the crowd and caught his arm. His face was pale, urgent. Daniel, there's something else you need to know. About Melissa and Richard. Daniel's eyes narrowed. What is it? Robert glanced around, lowering his voice. They weren't just lovers. They were co-conspirators. And Melissa, she played a bigger role than you think. Inside a waiting car, Robert unfolded a manila folder, sliding it across the leather seat. Daniel flipped it open. Inside were bank statements, confidential emails, and a signed affidavit from a whistleblower within the company. Robert explained, Melissa didn't just betray you emotionally. She helped Richard funnel company funds. He promised her a cut, a life of endless luxury. If she gave him inside information, your schedules, your projects, even your passwords. Daniel's jaw tightened, his knuckles whitening around the folder. She betrayed me. Professionally, too, he muttered. Robert nodded grimly. She didn't want you fired, Daniel. She wanted you ruined. That financial mishap you were blamed for? It wasn't just Richard. Melissa gave him the details. Flashback, deep foreshadowing anchor. Daniel remembered the night Melissa had begged him to leave his laptop unlocked. Just so I can watch movies while you're at work, she had said with a sweet smile. He had believed her then, but now he saw the truth. She had copied confidential files and handed them to Richard. The memory struck like a knife. She hadn't just left him. She had helped destroy him. Back at the cathedral, Melissa still knelt on the marble floor, sobbing as guests trickled past her with sideways glances. Some sneered, some pitied, none respected. The lavish dress that once made her feel like a queen now looked like a costume for a tragedy she had written herself. Robert's voice pulled Daniel back to the present. She may not face prison. Richard will take most of the fall. But her reputation is finished. She'll be marked as the woman who sold out love for greed and lost it all. Daniel closed the folder. His voice was low, steady, final. Then justice is complete. I don't need revenge. She already destroyed herself. As Daniel stepped out of the car, reporters swarmed with questions. One shouted above the rest, Mr. Whitmore, now that you've taken back your company, what will you do about your ex-fiancée? Daniel looked straight into the cameras, his face unreadable. My answer, he said, will be given tomorrow. At the press conference. The crowd erupted in chaos, desperate for the next chapter. Melissa, watching from the cathedral steps, felt the blood drain from her face. Whatever Daniel was planning, it wasn't over. The next morning, the ballroom of Whitmore Enterprises headquarters overflowed with reporters, shareholders, and executives. Cameras lined the back wall, their red recording lights glowing. The buzz of whispered speculation filled the air. The city was waiting to hear from the man who had gone from fired employee to rightful owner in a single day. When Daniel stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. He looked sharp in a navy suit, his posture steady, his eyes clear. Gone was the man mocked as finished. In his place stood a leader. He approached the podium, his voice firm, controlled, carrying authority that silenced even the clicking cameras. Yesterday I was called nothing, a failure, a man unworthy of respect, and I was betrayed by the woman I loved and the man I trusted to manage my company. That betrayal played out publicly in front of all of you, but today I stand before you to tell the truth. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. I am Daniel Whitmore, the son of Edward Whitmore, founder of this company. I am the majority shareholder and I am the rightful CEO. Gasps rippled through the room. Some reporters leaned forward. Others scrambled to tweet the breaking news. Daniel continued, his tone softening just slightly. I hid my identity to see who was loyal when wealth wasn't visible, to understand how people treat a man they believe has nothing. And what I discovered was painful, but invaluable. The memory of Melissa's words cut through his mind like glass. Richard is everything you'll never be. You're finished. Daniel steadied his breath. Yesterday I was betrayed not just as a CEO, but as a man. Melissa Carter, the woman once closest to me, aligned herself with fraud, lies, and greed. She helped Richard Hale attempt to bleed this company dry, and when she thought I had nothing left, she abandoned me. The crowd erupted in murmurs. Flashbulbs strobed like lightning. Melissa, watching from a TV in her hotel room, felt her heart slam against her ribs. Her face, streaked with yesterday's ruined makeup, reflected back at her from every news broadcast. Daniel's voice grew stronger. Let her story serve as a lesson. Loyalty cannot be bought, love cannot be traded, and greed will always destroy those who worship it. He looked directly into the cameras, his words aimed not at the crowd, but at her. Melissa, you once asked me to save you. But the truth is, only you could save yourself. And you chose diamonds over dignity. Your downfall is your own doing. Applause erupted. Reporters shouted questions. What will you do with the company now? What about Richard's charges? Will Melissa face consequences? Daniel raised a hand, silencing the chaos. Whitmore Enterprises will not be defined by fraud or betrayal. It will be rebuilt with integrity, with loyalty, with people who value more than money. That is my promise as CEO. The room exploded in applause, the kind that drowns even the loudest whispers. Daniel stepped back from the podium, not triumphant but resolute. As the cameras clicked wildly, Robert leaned close to Daniel, whispering something almost lost in the roar of applause. Melissa is here. In the building. Daniel's jaw clenched. He turned slowly toward the entrance of the ballroom, where the doors were just beginning to open. The ballroom doors creaked open. Conversations hushed. Cameras swung toward the entrance, and there she was, Melissa Carter. Her once perfect gown was wrinkled, her tiara slightly crooked, her eyes swollen from sleepless tears. But she held her head high, forcing a smile that no longer carried power. Every step she took across the polished floor echoed like a drumbeat of shame. The crowd parted, some out of pity, others out of disgust. Reporters whispered frantically, their pens scratching faster than her footsteps. She reached the stage, her gaze fixed on Daniel. Daniel, she said, her voice breaking through the silence. Please, just hear me. One last time. The crowd collectively leaned forward. Melissa clasped her hands together, her voice trembling. I was wrong. I was blind. I thought Richard was my future, but he was poison. I left you because I was afraid of losing everything. But what I lost was you, the only man who truly loved me. Please, Daniel, give me a second chance. Let me stand by your side again. I'll do anything. Gasps rippled through the room. Some guests murmured in disbelief, the once proud woman now begging before the man she had mocked. Daniel's eyes lingered on her. Memories flickered. Her laughter when she slipped her hand into Richard's arm, her voice dripping with scorn when she called him finished. His father's words returned once more. Wealth will show you who people really are. And once they show you, never forget it. He stepped closer, his voice low but carrying the weight of every betrayal. Melissa, when I had nothing, you left me. When I was humiliated, you laughed. You chose greed over love, lies over loyalty. And now when truth has stripped you bare, you come crawling back. Her eyes filled with tears. Because I see clearly now. I was wrong. Daniel cut her off, his tone sharp, final. No, you see wealth now, not me. And that's the difference. The ballroom was silent, the words cutting deeper than any scream. Daniel straightened, turning to face the cameras. Melissa Carter is not my future. She is the lesson of my past. And my past no longer controls me. Melissa fell to her knees, sobbing openly. No one reached for her. Not even the reporters dared interrupt. Daniel extended a hand, but not to her. Instead, he gestured to a loyal longtime employee standing in the crowd, one who had defended him when others mocked. These are the people I will build with. People who stayed when they thought I had nothing. That is true loyalty. That is true love. Applause thundered through the ballroom, drowning Melissa's cries. As Daniel walked off the stage, the cameras captured the image that would plaster front pages by morning. Daniel Whitmore, standing tall, the rightful CEO, Melissa Carter, crumpled on the floor in the ruins of her own choices. The story was no longer about betrayal. It was about justice, about loyalty, about the cost of greed, and for Melissa it was about regret, the kind that lasts a lifetime.